Sushi Squad, assemble! What is up, gamers? My name's Scyushi. We back again some more Trove, and today is the day to remember because it's the highly requested video where we're going to be talking about all the different tiers of the classes that you can use in the delves, that you can't use, and some of them that you just should not use. Now, unfortunately for today, guys, because we're just talking about stats and numbers and which classes are going to be viable, we're probably just going to be sitting here in Team Pixel rather than me giving you prime examples of hopping in the delves over and over. But I can speak from personal experience as well as experience that I've heard from others about which characters are going to be viable. And it's going to be kind of unfortunate and fortunate at the same time. A lot of you guys are not going to be able to use the classes that you would like to. And then some of you, your mains might already be good. The other thing too that I want to mention very, very clearly, guys, is when I'm talking about classes being viable in different tiers for the delves, I'm most of all talking about the end game delves. So this is as soon as you get to U10 difficulty and up within the delves, which is around like floor 120 or something like that. I don't know the specifics yet. I'm trying to track that number down. But the point is, certain characters are just not going to do as good as others, while all of them may or may not have a specific function. So most of all, this is going to end up affecting those of you that are going into the public delves. So the one that you have in the hub world, rather than private delves and challenge delves. Obviously, it's going to affect you guys as well, but for the most part, there's a little too many like class variants that I'm seeing in the hub area here. So that's why I really want to get this video out to you guys as soon as possible. We had more lengthy videos coming out lately, so I wanted to take a little bit of a break from that and just let you guys know up front, okay, these guys work, these ones don't, so that you know, don't go into here as like a Neon Ninja, for example. But again, I want to reiterate, if you're in lower tiers of delves, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever character you want, so long as you're going to end up being in easier difficulty delves. Play whatever you want, whatever you have fun with. But the point is that obviously most of us want to be in delves of U10 difficulty or higher, because as soon as you get to U10 difficulty, you can get Crystal 4. So that's the big thing that a lot of people are waiting on, and unfortunately a lot of classes you might have to leech in order to get Crystal 4. Shadowhunter in particular, I'm looking at you because I really want to get a Crystal 4 bow, but in order to do that, I have to be with a decent enough group, because you cannot really do anything as the Shadowhunter once you get to that tier of difficulty. You kind of can, but it depends on the generation. And most of all, it depends on your light stat value, because that's the biggest factor here. Is the light stat that you have is going to end up vastly changing how much damage you do in the delves, because the delve enemies are all going to have a base darkness stat. Just to put it into perspective, darkness in this game is armor. It's an ability that only enemies can end up having. It puts your damage output to them down by a certain percentage, and then light is literally going to increase that percentage. The light stat is something that players can only get and is basically like armor penetration, right? So all of the enemies in the delves are going to have a base darkness stat. This is how the game can end up keeping itself difficult, because technically speaking, players in this game already do max damage, because the game itself is like, I forget what it is. It's like the game is on like 32-bit code or something, so the numbers can only go to a high enough value or something weird like that. I don't know, because the game engine is like so dated, right? And because of it, the enemies themselves can only have a certain amount of health. So the only way that they can end up changing and making the game more difficult is by having this multiplier value of defensive stat on enemies. Just a little fun Trove trivia for you. So anyways, it's not like the point that I'm getting at, and why I have such a big grin on my face like an idiot, is because the delve portals will actually warp you into them based on the power rank that you have on the classes that are going in. But power rank doesn't mean jack, because if you have high power rank, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a high enough light value that you can end up doing any damage, right? So anyways, with all of that out of the way and without further ado, let's get into it. But before we do, I would appreciate if you guys that are new to the channel use that affiliate link in the description to sign up for Trove. And quite literally, if you ever, for whatever reason, buy anything out of the cash shop, I'll make a percentage of it. It's an awesome way you can support me by doing it. And thank you so much if you guys end up doing that. Let's look at the classes. Let's get into it. We'll start from the bottom and go all the way up, I guess, unless we kind of categorize. So first and foremost, unfortunately, I'm going to tell you guys that melee characters don't really work that well in the delves. And further than that, any characters that use physical damage, throw them in the garbage. Unfortunately, this update is very heavy about not only using ranged characters, but characters that can actually end up doing enough damage. Again, we're talking about end game delves, okay? Early game delves, none of this matters, all right? You can use whatever class you want, but unfortunately, a lot of the flaws with these classes comes front and center because it's like Ultra Shadow Towers, but harder. So there's also a time limit. So it's like you have to have the top tier characters in order to be able to actually get through these delves fast enough, because you have to be able to kill the enemies fast enough. So on top of having a light value stat, any characters that have physical damage, you pretty much aren't going to want to use. Revenant can be good, but honestly, you're going to build him towards a tank. We'll talk more about that later because I'll talk about each individual class. Vanguard, you can kind of use to a certain depth and then eventually ends up becoming useless. So you pretty much are going to have all your chips invested into a magic set. And I know that a lot of you guys have physical sets because I've seen quite a few Neon Ninja mains. I'm actually very surprised. And I know a couple of them that don't have a magic set. So now more than ever, you got to work on that. Knight, I think, also could be a sleeper hit. I think that he actually is a lot more powerful than people think because his class gem ability got a huge rework like a year or two ago. And he actually ended up becoming very viable just because of his damage. I still haven't tested him out in delves myself, so you know, I can't really say with 100% certainty. I know for a fact he's not going to do as good as most of the magic characters, but just as far as if you have absolutely no choice, maybe you want to try the Knight out. Neon Ninja, though, I mean, his shuriken's kind of nice, but he's not really going to end up being that good outside of being fast. Ideally, if you have like a really, you know, if you're just speeding through the delves, right? Like you're not doing the absolute max difficulty. You're just going for U10 and anything deeper than that. I'd say get 2 Neon Ninjas to rush to the end to complete the objective to get to the boss room, because you have to have 2 players if you have a full group, and then everybody else can be a damage dealer and just deal with all of the enemies. Now that said, that's going to be thrown right out of the window as soon as you end up getting to the deeper delves, and you have to be a lot stronger. But in all honesty, my argument is that because the easier delves can be completed a lot faster, they're going to be a lot higher chance of you actually getting Crystal 4, just because you're going to end up opening that much more chests, which inevitably is going to give you that much more odds of actually getting Crystal 4, as opposed to, technically speaking, the deeper you are, the more common Crystal 4 is supposed to be. But the fact is, once you get to a certain depth, it just becomes impossibly difficult. So I'm expecting them to fix this. Otherwise, this is a joke. So to skim over the physical characters, because again, they're most of all useless. Knight should be okay. Neon Ninja, Vanguard's probably your best bet. Revenant, most of all, you're building towards tank. We'll talk later. Lunar Lancer, useless. And Boomeranger has been useless for a very long time. Candy Barb, maybe if you build him towards a tank, but honestly speaking, you're not going to be doing anything for damage. And Shadowhunter, unfortunately, is not that useful either. Shadowhunter's going to have a lot more survivability than any of the other physical-based characters just because he's ranged. But we all know that Shadowhunter is very, very lacking. And like most characters in the game, is in sore need of an update and increased damage numbers. Now, as far as building characters for tanks, when I say that, I mean you literally are just going to get nothing but health. You are not trying to get damage. I have a lot of you guys constantly asking me, you know, why my health is so low on so many of my characters. That's because I have my characters built properly, which means no health, all damage. That's pretty much Trove's end game right there, is just getting the maximum amount of damage possible while also trying to have 100% crit hit, and then just having certain values of your magic damage combined with your crit damage, so on and so forth. Once you get to the end game, the numbers really don't make much of a difference. You'll literally change like 2 things and do like 1k more damage. It honestly doesn't matter. But anyways, you throw all of that under the bus as soon as you're trying to end up being a tank, and you just try to get millions and millions of health. You need to have that much in order to have the survivability, and then you're going to end up being able to pull the enemies in. There's going to be the new vacuum module, which you can upgrade, which I would strongly recommend you upgrade if you are building towards a tank. If you're not, however, that vacuum will be the death of you if you're not using the unyielding emblem, because you'll pull the enemies in, woo, there goes all your flasks, man. Like, it sucks. We'll talk about the flasks and subclass abilities very, very briefly before we move on to the magic-based characters. So Death Defiance can be your best bet for flasks. The other big thing about the delves is flask capacity is your best friend. So Knight subclass is pretty much all you're going to go for, because you want to have that survivability. You need to be able to last long enough to get to the boss room in the first place before you end up tackling actually completing the dungeon fast enough to complete the objective, right? You have to be able to survive. So that's where unyielding comes into place, because obviously it gives you invulnerability frames. You could swap this out if you want to with something else, like maybe an energy regen one or what have you, maybe chronomatic, I don't know. And then arcane or martial, depending on what your character is. You know, it's very simple and to the point. For the allies, you're going to end up going for the new light allies, and then for the banners, you're going to go for the new light banners. So as you go through the delves, you can end up crafting said allies in these tiers. Oh my god, I can actually craft these already? Jeez. You can craft these different allies that give you a lot of light value and damage to them, and there's also going to end up being various banners that you'll get as drops, and you can craft these into various bonus effects that you'll end up getting from them. Right now I'm just using the one that you get out of the pressure boxes, which just gives you more inert geode upon killing enemies, so that's probably the most useful. Other than that, I mean, that kind of covers the stats. Obviously, you gotta end up having your character as strong as possible, so anywhere around 100,000 to your magic or physical damage and up. Crit damage, I'd like to see at 800%, maybe 1,000 and up, and then you have to have your crit hit at 100%, obviously. Other than that, you should be good. Now we can get a little bit more detail for each of these magic-based characters, because they're obviously going to end up being a lot better at it. Pirate Captain, he technically is a very powerful character and very underestimated. He's actually got some of the highest damage numbers in the game. The problem is that it only really works when all of the stars align and you have like multiple, you know, cannons and ults and whatever. You gotta have like everything activated at once for the Pirate Captain to really shine, which doesn't always happen. And on top of that, he, I would say, is one of the more useless characters as far as range, just because even though he's cool and he's really powerful, the fact is that the damage output is completely random, because it just depends on what your turrets decide to target, you know? So unless all of the enemies are clumped up, it's not really going to work out for you, at least as far as normal delves. You could be using the Pirate Captain for the boss, but if you're not doing enough damage to all the base enemies and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter, and the enemies are very, very spread out in the delves. You can get lucky and get melee enemies, which are the most common, and they'll just kind of all converge on you at once. But when you're talking about the ranged enemies, I mean, they're just going to circle strafe around the room. It's really annoying. So pick your poison. It's up to you if you want to use Pirate Captain. I wouldn't recommend him, especially for the late game stuff. Ice Sage, definitely viable. Ice Sage is a very good support character. Go figure that not only does he do like insane amounts of damage, people underestimate Ice Sage all the time, but Ice Sage is very, very good support because of the fact that you're going to slow the enemies down. So it increases survivability for your whole group because it slows down their attack animation as well. And on top of that, if you're using another character in combination, like Draco and Ice Sage is actually a really good combo, because the enemies will end up targeting the Draco's minions. And if the Ice Sage is there slowing all those guys down, it just makes it a lot easier for you. So it's entirely up to you if you want to end up doing that. Faye Trickster, I've seen people try it and don't. Faye Trickster has technically some of the strongest single target damage in the game, but that's again, same as the pirate captain. It's pretty useless when the broad strokes of the painting here are that you have to be able to clear hundreds of enemies before you end up getting to the boss room in the first place, depending on what you're dealing with objective wise. But still, you have to be able to do damage, and Ice Age does not really handle groups very well. And unfortunately, the number one, your bomb ability, as far as I know, still has knockback to it, so it can end up being really annoying. Barb, like we said, can be useful as a tank, but honestly speaking, your probably best bet is to use the Revenant. Unfortunately, Revenant's lifesteal has been nerfed. I don't know if it's only in the Delves or just the entire game, but it's very, very annoying, actually, because Revenant is not nearly as useful as he once was, just in general, let alone like with the Delves. That said, you're just going to have more health to compensate for that. But anyways, Gunslinger, very, very good. Everyone keeps saying it's the best. It's not, because Gunslinger is one of those characters that obviously has some of the best damage numbers in the game. But the problem is that he's burst damage. So unless you're dealing with like a monolith or something like that, Gunslinger is actually going to fall short compared to other classes that will have consistent damage. That said, you can main Gunslinger. He's top tier. He's fine. No issues whatsoever. Same with the Ice Sage. You can use that no problem as well. Gunslinger might be a little bit easier for you. Draco, I'd say, is the sleeper hit. I'd say he's probably your best bet. And I know that I might get a little bit of flack for that, but Gunslinger, not Gunslinger, Draco, if you have all of your dragon babies out, actually has damage that rivals the Gunslinger. On top of that, the survivability is key, as we've talked about, and at least having one Draco in the group is going to make your life so much easier, because with the Draco, you don't even need to waste space, on a tank. You could just have damage dealers if you have a Draco, because with a Draco, all of the enemies are going to end up targeting his minions, right? So that essentially is going to be giving you a tank right there, because as you throw your minions, you can throw them out consistently and indefinitely, so you'll have that much more survivability. Tomb Raiser works for that same function as well, just not as well. Tomb Raiser, because of his rework, obviously has some really good damage numbers. He actually is just about at the same level as the Draco, if the stars align. Same as Pirate Captain, you have to have your ultimate completely maxed out. You have to have all your babies maxed out and everything like that, and you can actually do some pretty insane damage numbers. But Tomb Raiser still is a little bit too slow to build up to those damage numbers. Not like Draco, where you can just throw down your babies and just keep shooting fire and that's it, you win. With Tomb Raiser, you're pretty much spamming all your abilities non-stop to get him to his maximum, which the point is, Tomb Raiser is viable. You can use Tomb Raiser. You're going to have pretty good survivability because your babies are going to take aggro, but they are not as tanky as the Draco ones. I don't know. Pick your poison. Which one do you want to use? Draco's probably going to end up being a little bit stronger than Tomb Raiser, but the point is Tomb Raiser is viable. You can use him. Boomeranger, obviously useless. Revenant, you can use as a tank. Lunar Lancer, useless. Chloromancer, useless. Don't even use it. Dinotamer, useful. You might be able to actually use this character. I say might because I don't know if the damage keeps up with the other characters as well, but I would strongly recommend the Dinotamer, actually. Lots of people underestimate the Dinotamer, and I get the question very often of whether people can end up maining the Dinotamer. Dinotamer is one of those rare cases where he came out of the gates pretty good. He's had a little bit of tweaking here and there, and unfortunately, your little babies that you summon are going to be kind of useless. But a lot of the Dinotamer's abilities shine in the Delves more so than they have anywhere else. Dinotamer is one of the fastest farmers in the game because you're on your ult all the time. On top of that, he was always really good for Shadow Towers, despite the fact that I never saw it use him. Dinotamer was one of the early boys that could actually solo Ultra Tower just because he doesn't have any energy to deal with, so you can jump in the air and give you a lot more survivability for physical-based battles, as well as just ranged characters in general. You can kind of dodge their attacks a little bit more, but it's difficult. The point is, though, with him in Delves, when you throw down your net with your ult out, that net is going to snare all those enemies, so that's very, very useful. Not to mention the net does tons of damage. So again, if you have somebody using the vacuum to pull all the enemies in, or a tank, then you throw down your net at that location, and it's just going to end up going wild, doing lots of damage. And your dino babies are actually going to end up being pretty useful as well, more particularly the one that stuns enemies, just because any edge that you can get to have more survivability, you got to take it when it comes to the delves. So again, just a quick run up. If you're a physical based character, and I mean physical attack, you probably want to go for Vanguard. It's probably your best bet. Otherwise, I don't know. You could try the others, but honestly speaking, Vanguard's probably going to be your best bet, just because you can go to ranged mode if you need to. It's not going to have as much damage as some of the magic characters, but if all you have is a physical set, well, there you go. You can build a tank as Revenant or Barb. Probably Revenant would end up being better, though, just because even with his lifesteal nerf, he is still going to end up having a lot more survivability. Knight possibly could end up being good as well, just because his class gem ability deals damage to a wide range of enemies, but it's entirely up to you at that point. Like, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, because the magic characters are the ones that shine. So Ice Sage, you can use. Gunslinger for sure. Draco 100%. Tomb Raiser, yes. Dinotamer, kinda yes. If you have a group, Dinotamer might work. I don't know if his damage numbers would be good enough to use him solo, but there you have it, folks. That's pretty much going to end up being the top tier. So if possible, and I hate to say it because I've seen so many Neon Ninjas in the delves, unfortunately, if you guys are Neon Ninjas and if you've got the options, please swap off. Same with if you're a Faye Trickster. I've seen too many people playing like the odd characters, and I hate to do this because I'm a big advocate of playing the classes that you enjoy. But that's the whole point, is if you're trying to get end game delves, swap your characters. It'll make it easier for everybody, okay? That said, if you're doing the easier tiers of delves, then again, none of this really matters, and you can pretty much use whatever character you want. Obviously, the top tier characters I mentioned will end up doing the lower tiers that much better, but they're not required, is kind of the thing. Now that said, in closing, because I mentioned previously about staying in the lower tiers of the delves is probably going to end up being better for you to get Crystal 4, because it means you're going to get the chests more often than being in a higher tier of delve. Obviously, the highest tier of delves is saved for the best of the best. You got to have a full group of 8 people that are super duper godlike at this game, which doesn't really happen with me that often. I have like maybe a handful of people that I play with regularly, and only a couple of them can actually keep up to my power. Most of all because I pay to win. But but on top of that, what I'd recommend is if you just want to do it really easy peasy, you can hop into a public portal, take off all of your gear to lower your power rank so that you start at a lower floor, at an easier floor, and then you can end up putting all of your gear on, because if you go to a public delve, you won't be able to change your class like you will in a private or a challenge delve. But on top of that, what you can do is you hop in a public delve, get to the 3rd room, get that shadow chest, and depending on how powerful your group is, you could either continue to the next shadow chest, or you could just leave and re-enter the delves and repeat. Or you could go to the private delves, in which case you can just go on a lower power rank character, go into the portal, swap to a stronger character, easy peasy. But again, the key is that you want to stay around that U10 difficulty sweet spot as long as you can before it starts getting too difficult, and then just repeat until you hopefully end up getting some Crystal 4 gear. That said, again, Crystal 3, Crystal 2 have actually had their drop rates increased across the board, so whether you're in delves or even just GEODE surface, so it should be a lot more accessible for people. My god, my voice is starting to break like crazy. I've been recording non-stop, guys, to try and get these videos ready for you, and this one I hope was very, very helpful, because I know that a lot of you guys have been asking about this, and the delves in general can be very confusing about which characters you're going to want to use, because they change it up quite a bit. If I would have to choose a top tier, for me personally, Draco. But that's because I just generally like his gameplay. It's very lazy and gives you a lot of survivability while also having a lot of damage. If you like jumping around like a freak, maybe you want to use another character in general, but Draco is going to end up working just fine. Don't let anybody tell you different. I've seen some people that think they're try hard in this game saying, oh no, you know, Scythe uses Draco because it's stupid, you know, you're an idiot. And it's like, no, Draco's one of the best tanks in the game. Also, he has a lot of damage. The reason he's one of the best tanks isn't because he's got a lot of life, which he kind of has a lot of defense in general. It's because the Draco babies, man, like they're very viable to end up using end game. I love the rework that they did to the Draco years ago. Like, it's so good. I would just personally recommend him as the ease of use. You can just jump into the delve so long as you have a powerful enough Draco. Tomb Raiser with the rework will work as well. But I don't know how long I'm going to end up maining Tomb Raiser before I probably just inevitably swap back to Draco, just because it's a little bit stronger than Tomb Raiser, but the Tomb Raiser changes are nice. So if you like maining Tomb Raiser, you definitely can. But I'm just trying to use this as an example. I'm not trying to go off on a tangent. Let's just call it here. Thanks for watching. Smash like, sub for more. Buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have yourselves a fantastic day, gamers. Sign on, stay epic, and I'll see you in the delves.